Hello, everybody, and welcome to Isolation Station Discs, episode 10. Today I have with me my friend from Wales. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Andy Clarke, and welcome to my little studio. I had a spring clean the other day, not just for this, but because spring cleaning is one of the things that we can do right now. And I'm a designer, and I work here most of the time.
Okay, so you're a designer. Designing, what is that, and what passions do you have in life?
I design web stuff mainly, so I spend 75% of my time right now working with a cybersecurity company out in Switzerland. Um, but I take on other client work as well, and I really enjoy the kind of variety of things that I get to do, whether it be kind of art direction stuff or graphic design or or product stuff, which is what I do with the company in Switzerland. And when I'm not working, which is not very often, um, my passions are actually I read a lot about design. Certainly over the last few years, I've been doing a lot more reading about design, much more sort of broader sense, from kind of magazine and editorial design to classic kind of graphic design stuff. So I do a lot of reading and sort of playing around that kind of stuff. And I watch a lot of movies. I tend to keep if I'm working on my big screen, I tend to have an iPad or my laptop at the side that's kind of playing movies during the day. So watch a lot of films. Um, so yeah, I love cinema, and obviously the topic of this conversation is music. I would say that I'm sporting my Motorhead T-shirt just for you, David, but I seem to wear a Motorhead T-shirt of some variety pretty much all the time. I think at last count, I think I've got 14 Motorhead T-shirts.
That's quite impressive.
It's a decent collection of Motorhead T-shirts, yeah.
Excellent. And I noticed you've started designing um, code/music T-shirts. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I did. Well, it was just a sort of a funny thing. Every now and again you will see somebody, they'll tweet a funny little bit of code. If it's to do with social distancing, then it's like margin, however, 200 centimeters or whatever it might be. And there's always these little kind of code jokes going on. And I thought, well, just one day, I thought, I wonder whether I could actually typeset some CSS properties, but in the shape of band logos, very recognizable band logos, but change the words. So, for example, Motorhead would become margin top. And actually, it was a lot more challenging than I thought, because you think, oh well, I'll just go and find the Motorhead font or the Iron Maiden font or whatever. But actually, I spent a lot of time trying to find the right CSS property for the right band, keeping the property the same number of letters, and trying to keep as many of the original letters as possible. So Iron Maiden became Font Family.
Yeah.
Nirvana became Display. If you think about Oasis, they have their logo, which is actually just set in Helvetica. But they have the like a background with a border, an outline around the outside. So that turned into Outline, which is again, begins with an O and it's the same number of letters. So I did that, and I just threw them up on a little Squarespace store. I've got to be honest, they haven't sold as well as I thought that they might do. But it's a very niche market, isn't it? People that like heavy metal and people that understand CSS. I don't. It's not exactly a mass market proposition.
No, no, but they do look cool. And I'll share a link on when I post this interview as well, going on about that. Okay, so Tell us about some things that you've started doing since lockdown that you didn't used to do before. How does that work?
Get off of my arse out of this chair is what I do most often now. We've just had our garden landscape, so there's a couple of little sunny spots with tables in the garden, and I've found myself actually getting outside a little bit more than I used to. But I'm also just, I used to be really practical. 20, 30 years ago, I wouldn't think twice about getting my hands dirty and fitting a kitchen or, doing a load of painting and decorating. And, as I got older, I just stopped doing it. I'll hire the old job man to come and do it. But I've actually been doing, quite a lot in and around. I'm looking here at a desk shelf that I decided to buy. I, instead of spending 150 quid at Grove Made, I made one for less than 40 and it's really nice. And I've been doing stuff. I painted the outside of the house last week. So all of that kind of stuff. And also I've actually really got into growing alpines. That sounds like a very middle-aged thing to do. But outside this studio is a little stone wall that we had built, and it's got a void in the middle, which I'm growing alpines in. And it's really fun to watch those little guys grow. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So obviously you work from home all of the time. So what one piece of advice can you give to people that have found that they basically can't leave anymore for the time being?
Well, I mean, I can't really give working from home advice because to me it's the kind of the normal. But I think my general piece of advice for people all of this stuff is don't watch the fucking news. It's all consuming. We all know there's a problem. We all know that we have a responsibility. We all know that sadly people are dying and whatever. But if you're one of these people that has news notifications, or you turn on the BBC News at 6 o'clock when you have your tea or whatever. It can be all-consuming, and people that are in our industry tend to be they're head workers, right? It's like we're not building walls, we're using our brains, and there's only a certain amount of kind of cognitive load that you can take, and on top of other pressures that we have right now, work pressures, family pressures, kids' education pressures, all that kind of stuff. Having this kind of all-pervasive negativity constantly is extremely detrimental to mental health. So I would just say, we all know there's a problem. We all know we can't go to, we all can't go to the pub. But, don't listen to it all day long. If something catastrophic is going to happen out in the real world, we'll hear about it at some point. We don't need this kind of stuff constantly. So I think for everybody's sanity, just stop watching the news.
That's great advice. It really is, because it is everywhere, and some of it is just horrible as well, and some of it's made up. Some of it's just spoken by idiots. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk.
No, we're not.
So let's jump straight in. So when you were 18, tell me about a song that was really, really important to you when you were 18. It doesn't have to be a song that was released when you were 18. It's something that was important when you were 18.
Well, many, many, many years ago, when I was 18, it was like, the very early 80s. So, many, many years ago, I actually played in a band, a local band in Corby, which is where I grew up in the Midlands. And, we had a decent band and we kind of played around a bit. They didn't hire me for my keyboard playing abilities. They hired me for my cheekbones because, in the 80s, having great cheekbones as a keyboard player was the most important thing that you could have. You can play with two fingers on a Roland synthesizer, but nobody can fake cheekbones, right? So I had great cheekbones back then. And one of the things that we did we supported a bunch of, when people would come to town or they come to the local area, we would often be the support act. So we supported the UK Subs punk band. We actually supported Gary Glitter once, although we don't talk about that anymore. And the best thing that we did, the best support gig that we did was actually Billy Bragg on his first tour. And it was in support of the striking miners, which is, obviously something that was very important, back then. So we supported Bill and got to hang out with Bill on his first tour. And everybody else in the band absolutely hated him and his music. But I really liked it. And I've always been a massive fan of Bill. And the interesting thing was I've still got the backstage pass from that gig. And when my son was growing up, he got into Billy Bragg as well. So we actually went to see Bill play in Liverpool one evening. And after the gig, I took this backstage pass to the stage door and gave it to the bouncer and said, can you ask Billy if this is still valid? And a few minutes later, the guy came back and he sort of beckoned us. And then we got to hang out with Billy in the dressing room for the next couple of hours. And Alex got to hang out with him and whatever. So that was a fun thing. So the track that I've chosen is actually from that era. And it's the Milkman of Human Kindness from Bill's album, Life's a Riot with Spy versus Spy.
I really like Billy Bragg as well, and he's such a down-to-earth guy. He lives quite close to me, where I live now, but I have met him numerous times, been to see many of his gigs, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, but let's move on to a song that was given to you whilst you were a child. And how did you come by that song?
Well, the song is actually it's Wild West Hero by ELO. And I remember, when I was a young kid, discovering music. We're talking about kind of the middle to late 70s, I suppose. And I suppose he was an uncle. Some member of the family. I always remember going to his house, and he was a hi-fi buff, and he had, the big speakers. He didn't have a music center like we had back then. He had, the big speakers, and he had reel-to-reel tapes. And one of the things that he was really into, and then I got really into, was actually ELO. So some of those very kind of early ELO albums, El Dorado, Face the Music, A New World Record, is really, really good. And then, of course, it got massive with Out of the Blue, which is that very famous double album. It's got Turn to Stone and Sweet Talking Woman and all that kind of stuff on it, and Wild West Hero. And I still have all these latest vinyl copy of Out of the Blue on blue vinyl. So Wild West Hero, I think, is my choice off that album.
Fantastic. Have you actually seen ELO in your many years?
Well, you see, they were massive, and then they stopped. Yeah. And I, as a child, growing up, I would like, oh man, when are ELO going to play? When are they come locally? When are they going to do this? And they never did. And it was actually last year that I actually got to see Jeff Lynne's ELO at the Manchester Arena. And now, of course, they're doing a lot more tours, and they're really getting back into it. So I went to see them only last year, and like I say, I waited 30 years to see ELO live.
So I saw them a couple of years ago at Glastonbury, and as they played Mr. Blue Sky, it stopped raining. And of course, you
Amazing.
can imagine the whole crowd just going nuts because it had stopped raining.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, I've seen that gig. I've seen that gig, and I've seen the video of the big Hyde Park gig, which kind of kicked off that whole revival. So yeah, no, I love ELO, and yeah, Wild West hero.
Fantastic. Tell me about an artist that you've discovered recently, because music should not stay still. You should just keep gaining more onto your life, into your collection. So, what is that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, most of my musical listening stopped in about 1983. I still listen to so many of the things that I did listen to back then. And then a few years ago, I actually really, really got into country music. Sue and Alex and I, we were doing a road trip across the US, and we started listening, almost as a joke to begin with, we started listening to Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers in the van. And, it soon progressed to actually thinking, I actually really like this. So I've actually become a massive contemporary country music fan. But actually the choice that I've picked for this show is actually No Time to Die by Billie Eilish. And I thought to myself, there's something about this girl. She's obviously incredibly talented, but the stuff that she does normally is not the kind of thing that I would normally listen to. I don't like electronic music. I absolutely detest dance music of all kinds. And, it just is not the sort of thing that I would normally listen to. But, I thought, right, I'm going to sit down and properly listen to, the whole album, like all the way through. And not all of it's completely to my taste, but, some of it's really good. And then, of course, she gets chosen to do the No Time to Die theme tune for the next Bond movie. And that is spectacularly good. This girl can really sing. So I do like to find, odd people here and there. But my main musical tastes are, they're pretty much static.
Your playlist does represent that. But Billie Eilish, I saw her last week at Glastonbury again. Glastonbury is a great place for discovering music that you wouldn't usually listen to. But yeah, great choice. And that film's coming out at some point.
I think they said November.
Films, yeah. Okay, so looking at the list of songs that you sent to me, a lot of them were live. And for me, live music is so important. It's that shared experience of being in a room filled with so many other people who just love what you're into at the same time. So, tell us about which track you really chose, and why you chose so many different live versions as well.
You see, I don't go to as many gigs as I would like to. The last one that we went to was a country soul singer called Yola, Yola. Fabulous singer. She was playing at a small venue in Manchester a couple of months ago, and she's playing to like 300 people in this small room. It was unbelievably good. But I do really, really like good music live, and I've been to some great live shows over the years. I think the best live gig I ever went to was Queen at Milton Keynes Bowl back in, I think it was '84.
I think it was because it was after. Oh no, I'm talking of Nebworth. Yeah, because Nebworth was '86. It was after Live Aid, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I saw.
Yeah, this
Queen, and boy, wow, that man could entertain.
Yes, unbelievable. So I mean, but because I'm old, I did go and see lots of bands, you know, particularly kind of new wave British heavy metal bands back in the sort of late 70s, very early 80s. So, you know, I would go and see, you know, I saw Iron Maiden on their first tour, Motorhead a couple of times, Girls' School, Saxon, Judas Priest. And one of the shows that I went to, actually you can't believe this now, at the De Montfort Hall in Leicester, which is not a big venue, was AC/DC. And this was the first tour that Brian Robertson, after Bon Scott had died.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd been an AC/DC fan, got lots of albums and stuff up until that point. And was really, you know, I think when Bon died, I was like, oh man, I'm never going to go get to see AC/DC. But I did obviously see them with Brian, Back in Black. But my favourite album of all time is actually If You Want Blood, You've Got It by AC/DC. And just the energy that comes through on that album. I mean, it is stonkingly good. You know, it's not very heavy. You know, it's got a lot of that kind of you know, that kind of funk. I don't know whether that's the right word. That's kind of there in AC/DC's kind of early stuff. Fabulous, just the best live album of all time. And I've got some. You know, I've got some other examples of some great live albums, but that has to be the best live album of all
time. That's your opinion, but we like different music. I was quite young at those times, but I was alive, and I can remember Motorhead and AC/DC being in the charts, and we'd play it on a Walkman in the corner of the playground at school, and all of those. And then when I went to university, that was the music that we were listening to. There was a bit of hair rock and things like that as well, because it was towards the end of the 80s, and dance music hadn't really become what it became. But yeah, so you've chosen a couple of AC/DC tracks. What are they?
So the first one is High Voltage,
yeah.
Which is from If You Want Blood, You've Got It. The second one has to be Back in Black, from the Back in Black album. Starts with that, you know, the album starts with that sort of bell tolling for Bon Scott. I remember at the gig, there was the big Hell's Bell on the you know, floating over the stage. So yeah, a couple of AC/DC tracks. I think Back in Black is, you know, one of the standout tracks on that album. Obviously, there's others. Shoot to Thrill would be another one from that album. But again, it's the kind of thing where I think what you've got to do with some of this stuff like this, and it is a change of listening that maybe, you know, we have listening habits that, you know, maybe younger people don't have, is that, you know, we used to listen to albums, and we listened to albums like, you know, all the way through. And then, you know, you'd probably turn it over and then start listening to the whole thing all over again. So with both of these, you know, with both of those albums, If You Want Blood, You've Got It, and Back in Black, you know, don't just jump around to the tracks that you might recognize. Literally just, you know, sit there and listen to the whole thing all the way through, because, you know, these were not albums that were, you know, a collection of things from a playlist. Everything flows from one to the next. So listen to the whole album, kids.
That's very true. Certainly of a certain type of artist from those days. There was obviously pop artists, and pop artists were there to provide a service effectively. But there were then those artists that would build I don't want to call it a concept album, because a concept album is a different thing. But it's a story We're going to start here. We're going to take you along this journey, and we're going to end over here. And I'm thinking of things like the Led Zeppelin fourth album. It tells you a story. There was a band that I was really into in the mid '80s called Marillion, who you've probably heard
Yeah, I'm
of.
a fish.
And all of their albums, in fact, the first 5 albums actually told a story of one person all the way through. But there are artists that are doing that now. My favourite band at the moment is a band called Public Service Broadcasting, and the things that they're doing is just phenomenal. But that's not about me. So. Okay.
But the one more thing though, there isn't an example on this list. But one of my other favourite albums is British Steel by Judas Priest, and that is a fabulous example of how the arrangement of songs on an album, and the timing between each song is really important. And I can't remember. I can't remember which 2 tracks it is on the first half of that album now. But literally the way in which there's, the beat kind of carries on, but there is this kind of pause between tracks. It's just, perfectly assembled. And if you listen to them out of order, then it doesn't make sense. And also, we used to be able to, I can still probably tell it on some albums where you know what track finished side 1 and then which track started side 2, and that's a concept which obviously is disappeared now.
There's certain songs that I will listen to, and if the next track on the album doesn't come on straight afterwards, I get quite upset.
Yes, yeah, I know.
It's sort of like, but I was expecting to hear Brain Damage next, or whatever it is. I was expecting to hear this track, and it's not there. You've just cut to something else. Albums are very important. If you saw my collection, you'd realise what that is to me. So, out of all of the tracks on that list, which is the must go to track? You're going to tell me it's AC/DC, aren't you? Or is it?
I'm not actually. No, I'm not. I'm not going to tell you it's AC/DC. I mean, there's a bunch of things on this playlist that we might not get around to talking about. But I would say, what would be the standout track? I would like people to follow the YouTube link down below and watch the live performance of Overkill by Motorhead. And it's from a few years ago, but it's and it's like, I don't know, 10 minutes long or something. It's obviously the very last Motorhead lineup with Mickey D and Phil Campbell. But that video does really kind of capture as much as you can capture that kind of just all drowning excitement of a Motorhead gig. And Overkill was a classic track. We can talk about Ace of Spades or Iron Fist or all of these other things. Bomber is obviously another kind of classic track. Bomber is the first time that I saw Motorhead on Top of the Pops on TV. And I did kind of agonize between whether or not we were going to, I was going to put Bomber on this list. But I think that, if you listen to Motorhead kind of out of context, you put it on in the car or something, it was never really about the albums. It was always about the live performance. And this particular video of Overkill on YouTube is pretty damn close to being there. So that's going to be my standout track.
Oh, fantastic. So that video was recorded at Hammersmith, which is quite possibly one of my favourite live venues in the country. I've been to quite a few across the country. In fact, I've been to quite a few venues across the world. But Hammersmith, last 2 years ago, I went maybe 20 times to Hammersmith to see different gigs, and the place is just phenomenal. So it's just big enough to have a lot of people in there, but not too big like the O2 where you just sat at the back and you're lost. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, these massive arenas now are just rubbish. Whereas something like Brixton Academy or the Academy in Manchester or um, Hammersmith are just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, the the one thing I wanted to talk to you about was you've got Bat Out of Hell on your list. Um,
Yes. Excuse me.
Tell me about that.
Yes, I do. I do have Bat Out of Hell. I think that there are. I think that this must be the same for every generation, but um, I think that there are certain songs or certain albums which are literally baked into your DNA. I think I was
Hmm.
genetically developed to know all the words from Bat Out of Hell from start to finish. As soon as it starts playing, I couldn't tell it to you. I couldn't recite them now. But if you put Bat Out of Hell on, I'll be singing along to like literally every line from every song, even though I might not have heard the whole thing for like 10 years or
Yeah.
something. So, yeah, I put Bat Out of Hell on there because it is just one of those things that, A, it's a great album. You know, you can consider it a concept album. But it's just a great rock and roll album as well. And, you know, it's Meatloaf at his best. And yeah, I play that album once every few years, and I'll sing along to the whole thing all the way through. It's a great thing.
It was one of those things that somebody put on when I was at university. You know, students, you have to go sit and you eat pasta together and all of that, but somebody's got a record player in a corner, and Bat Out of Hell was one of those things that I got introduced to. But then a few years ago, there used to be a program on the telly called the Old Whistle Test.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
Which for me is probably the pinnacle of music TV. There have been other things more recently, but All Grey Whistle Test. But there's this one track off Bat Out of Hell. It's not Bat Out of Hell itself. It's Paradise by the Dashboard
by
Light,
Dashboard Light.
and it is
Yeah,
for me the best piece of music television that has ever been made. I'll send you a link to it later so you can watch it. It's like 10, 12 minutes long. And
yeah, it's a great
they're
track.
like having this argument and they're going to kill each other. And it's just a phenomenal performance.
It's great.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it's great. It's really good.
Cool. Okay, thank you for telling us about your music. What books are very important to people, especially now that they've got loads and loads of time on their hands. So, can you recommend a book that you think people might not have read?
Oh, what you mean? Apart from my own book?
You've got multiple books.
That was a cheap plug.
It was.
Yeah, I've written 4 or 5. Art direction for the web, available from Smashing Magazine. No, actually, I'm going to recommend a couple of books that I don't like to buy books electronically. I like physical books. I spend a lot of money on on physical books, particularly in graphic design and everything else. And I hunt them out. I'll find somebody that I'm interested in researching, and I'll go and trawl auction sites or whatever to find this stuff. But I do buy books occasionally for, when I'm traveling, or when I was traveling, I might like to, just read something on my iPad. And I'm actually going to recommend 2 books for you, which are completely unrelated to music or anything else. One is The Road to Jonestown. Jim Jones and the People's Temple by Jeff Gwynne. And when I was traveling to Switzerland a few months ago, there's a documentary on the BBC, a 2-parter, about the People's Temple and the Jonestown massacre, the mass suicide of 1,000 people in the Guyanan jungle. And this is a book about Jim Jones and basically the run up to that kind of horrible event. And it's a really good book. It's what the documentary series was based on. So I'm reading that, and that's really, really good. And then the other thing, which is slightly more relevant, I hope, to what we're talking about, and being locked down and mental health and everything else, is a book by Joanne Hari. It's called Lost Connections. Why You're Depressed and How to Find Hope. And I've been working my way through this, and it's a fascinating book. And the basic premise is, look, lots of people are depressed. Lots of people suffer from mental health issues. I know I do. And, we're told that it's a serotonin deficiency. So, like me, lots of people take drugs that, elevate your serotonin levels. And these, this medication, this sort of need for medication has become, it's almost epidemic levels. Huge swathes of the population take antidepressants or SSRIs every day. Now, surely not everybody can, have a serotonin deficiency. What the hell did we do before these things, right? So this book is really about how our brain works, not from a kind of a chemical point of view, but what we need from social groups, social interactions, the value that we need to feel in terms of achievement in our work, and feeling respected, or getting, feeling part of a group or whatever, and how the way that we live now has obviously changed dramatically from even 100 years ago, but obviously our brains are still 10,000 years old, and it's about changing the way that we live rather than just reaching for the 100 milligrams of sertraline that I take every morning. Because I'd like to wean myself off those things. I don't think that it can be, apart from weight gain, I don't think that it's necessarily great to be taking those things every day. So I want to find out a little bit more about some of the things that I can do to stop me from having to do that. And that's a great book. Somebody on Twitter, thank you, whoever you were, recommended it to me a couple of months ago, and it's really good.
Fantastic. Okay, so last question. After this is all over, what is the one thing that you're really looking forward to doing?
Fish and chips. I want to go to a chip shop and buy fish and chips. And eat them. I'll even fucking take my own newspaper so that I can then take them out of the polystyrene and put them in newspaper and add my vinegar and salt and whatever. I want to eat fish and chips. Man, I'd kill for fish and chips right now.
Wow. Do you have a favourite fish and chip shop then? Is there one
No.
that you will go to?
Actually, yes. There's a great fish and chip shop called Enoch's, which is just outside Llandudno, which is about 30 minutes away from here. We have a local chip shop or two down in the local town, but if you want the really good stuff, then you need to drive a little bit further. So fish and chips is what this man needs, what this body needs right now.
Cool. That's excellent. Thank you very much for taking part. I really hope you enjoyed it. Okay, cool. Thanks, Andy.
Cool. Thanks very much.
I really enjoyed that.